back to another sewing tutorial. My name is Ann-Sophie and I'm the founder of the slow fashion brand Solana Handmade. And when I learned how to sew in 2020, I learned so much from YouTube tutorials, and then I think 1.5 years later I started my made-to-order brand. And now I've decided to teach you what I've learned over the last years and teach you how to make some of my designs. And yeah, I just hope I can inspire you to make your own clothes. And today I'm teaching you how to make the Niki top. And the Niki top is a super cute top for summer with long straps on your shoulder that you can tie, and then you also tie it in the front. And this is really good for beginners because you also don't need to have an overlock machine for this. All we need is our normal sewing machine. And so far I've only made the Niki top with linen fabric and viscose, but today I'm going to use this cotton fabric that I bought in Brisbane at the fabric store. And like, it's this cream white with light blue stripes, and it's such a pretty fabric. And you also need, for the Niki top, the sewing pattern. I'm going to link it in the description, and you will, like, you can choose either to print it out in A4, what I've done here, or you can print it out in A0, which will make it maybe a bit easier and faster because you don't need to glue all the pages together. But last time I printed mine out in A0, and at the copy shop where I go to it was really expensive, so I printed mine out in A4 today. So I can also teach you again how to glue the pieces together. And then you need a measuring tape, because to find the right size you need only your bust measurement. So you take the measuring tape, wrap it around the widest part, widest part of your bust. And you need to be able to still move the measuring tape around a little bit, so don't make it too tight and don't make it too loose. And then whatever your measurement is, you can go to the size chart and find the right size. And yeah, so the first step we need to do now is we need to glue our pattern together. If you have it printed out in A0, you can already go to the next step. But yeah, we're gonna start. One more thing. You need also a safety pin. But I probably won't be using my safety pin because I have this little thing, it's called a loop turner, and of course you don't need it. You can super easily make it with a safety pin, but if you want to continue sewing more, I would recommend maybe you getting one of these. I've bought mine at a store in Barcelona, like at the fabric store, just I think it was €5, so it's really not expensive. And because we're gonna make 5 super long straps that we then tie on our shoulder, and this just, like, it makes turning the straps inside out so much faster. So yeah, if you want to continue sewing and next time you go to a fabric store, I don't know, it's just like a personal recommendation. I really love using mine. But yeah, let's go. I think I'm gonna go downstairs because my room where I'm working from, where I'm doing all my sewing, is upstairs, and we don't have air conditioning at home, which is horrible because I am in Australia and it's so hot here. And yeah, I'm just going to take you downstairs and we can glue the paper together downstairs. When you want to print out the pattern, you first need to print out the first page because you need to check that the settings are set correctly. So when you print out the first page, you need to check the measurements of either one of those boxes. So it either has to be 5 centimeters and 5 centimeters, or 2 inches and 2 inches. And if the measurements are correct, then you can go ahead and print out the other pages. But if it's not correct, then you have to go back and change some settings of your computer or of your printer. And yeah, it's just very important that you print all the pages out at a scale set at 100%. But once everything is correct, you can print the remaining pages. And then to put the sewing pattern together, we start with A1, then comes A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, D1 and D2. And what we need to do next, as you can see here, there's some dotted lines here, and you always need to put the next page on top. So 2 goes on 1. And I print my pages at a copy shop, and they told me that their printer doesn't print all the way to the edge, but it doesn't matter. It's just their printer doesn't print, but it's still set at the right scale. But yeah, so you put the new page just where the dotted line here is, and then at the same time this dotted line here on the side also needs to line up. And then you take the next page B and you put this also like right where the dotted line here is. And then this dotted line here needs to be in line with the dotted line below here. And then you take B2, put it on top of B1, and it's the same again. This dotted line here on the side needs to line up, and you need to put it right where the dotted line down here is. And then you continue doing this for the remaining pages, and then we glue it all together. So now that we have glued all the pages together, you need to take your bust measurement and then go to the size chart to find your right size. And I'm a size small, and I've printed my sewing pattern out in black and white. It's a bit easier when you print it out in color to find the right lines that you need to cut out. But all sizes have different dotted lines, so I just need to follow my right size, and you also have to do the same. And yeah, let's do that. Now we're back upstairs again, and now it's time to cut out the fabric. And on each pattern piece you can see how often you need to cut it out. The back you need to cut out twice, and the front you need to cut out 4 times. And then what I decided not to put as like a pattern to print out is the long straps, so we also need to have 4 long straps. And usually fabric is between 120 centimeters to 140 centimeters wide. And what you can do is you can cut 2 5-centimeter long straps of the width of the fabric, and then we just cut it in half, and then we have 4 of them. I'm going to show you how I do it, and then just do the same. So first we cut out the straps, and you need to measure 5 centimeters down from the edge of your fabric, from the top here, and then you make a cut. And it depends what fabric you're working with. Maybe you're lucky and you can just rip it now, just like this. It depends a bit what fabric you're working with, but if your fabric is not that easy to rip, then you just need to make some marks on your fabric for 5 centimeters, because the strap needs to be 5 centimeters long and needs to have the width, like the complete width of your fabric. On the pattern there's also some notches marked, but I realized when I print it out in black and white it's a bit hard to find which notches belongs to which side. And another way how to just make the notch is if you take the back, fold it in half, and then fold it in half again. And then you need to make a little cut right here, just so you now know where to sew in the back straps. So as you can see now, there's a little cut here, and then there's a little cut here. So here's a little summary of everything that we need now. We need to have 4 long straps that are 80 centimeters long and 5 centimeters wide. Then we need to have the back cut out twice. you need to cut out the front 4 times, and then you can see here also there's marks for where the notches need to go. And for a size small, my notch needs to go here, so I make a little cut just so I know when I'm sewing it where I need to put the strap. And I can take the needles out again. So now we need to thread our sewing machine, and if you've never threaded a sewing machine, I made a beginner's guide for everyone who wants to learn how to sew. So I would recommend maybe just going back to that video and watching that first. And yeah, I always recommend using sewing thread that matches your fabric perfectly. Sometimes it's a bit hard, especially when you work with colorful fabrics, to find matching sewing thread. But yeah, the people working at fabric stores, I feel like they're always super helpful and try to always help you find matching thread. And what we need to do now is we need to cut a little. And now we start sewing the straps of the top, and we take one of the long pieces of fabric and we fold it in half. And now here you can do it however you want it to look like. I would recommend sewing with a 1 centimeter seam allowance because I like my straps to be quite thin. But if you want your straps to be wider, you can maybe add with 2 centimeter seam allowance. But yeah, I'm gonna sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance away from the folded edge from beginning all the way to the end. And I will do that 4 times. My sewing machine is set to a straight stitch and my stitch length is set at 2.5. On my sewing machines there's some marks and some lines on here, so I'm just going to put my fabric underneath the foot, put the foot down, and now I'm gliding my fabric along the 1 centimeter mark. And now we have to do the same thing 3 more times. And now we need to cut off some of that excess fabric, because otherwise it will be quite hard to flip them the other way around. So we're gonna cut along here. We're gonna cut here where the fabric is open, and just cut a few, like half a centimeter away from the stitching. Just make sure you don't cut into the stitching. Option number 1 is you can take a safety pin, pin it through the fabric here, and then you stick this in here. Mine won't work because my safety pin is quite big, but you could stick it here. Now we got it. We can stick it through here and then slowly push it all the way till the other end, till it comes out again. But this takes too long for me. I love using this thing, the loop turner, and here you just stick it through one end, then it comes out on the other side, and then you stick this little metal thing through the fabric, and then you close it just like this, and now you slowly pull all the fabric through. And once this comes out, you can take this off, hold onto here, and just pull the rest out. Yeah, like this. And now you do the other 3 as well. And now that we have 4 long straps, we go over to our iron and iron them flat, and then we need to sew them into the top. We start with the front and we take 2 of the fabric pieces, and what we want to do now is we want to pin them together, just because then sewing them together will make it look more neatly. And here where we made the little notch, we need to take 1 of the long straps, and from the inside we place it here where we made the notch and also pin it in place. And what we need to do now is we need to start here and sew all the way around here, and it's just very important that we leave this part open, and the same for the other one. Here we also start here, sew all the way around, and we leave this part open, and we're gonna sew everything with a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And every time when we start sewing, we do some front stitches and then some back stitches, just to make sure that the stitching won't open up again. And here we have the strap, and when we sew it in, I would also recommend going over it and go back and go over it again, just to make sure that it's really secure. Here, maybe you need to lift your foot up, and every time when you need to lift the foot, I would recommend that, well, not only recommend, you actually have to make sure that the needle is down, because then you can move it and continue sewing and lift it again. Now here we have the 2 front pieces, and what we need to do here now is, first up, we can cut off this little thing if there's a bit of the strap hanging inside, and then also we cut around the curve here close to the stitching, but make sure don't cut into the stitching, because at the end we will need to turn this the good side facing out, and it's just going to look more neat when there's less fabric built up in this corner. And now we can just put them to the side for now, and we move on to the back. Now we move on to the back, and first we need to find the top of the back, and the top is where the notches are that we made. So we can fold this open a bit, then we take 1 of the straps and we pin it right where the notch is. And then we do the same for the other notch. And now we pin all along here. So now we want to sew all along here, and where the straps are, make sure to maybe go back and to the front again, and same here, just to make sure that they are really secure and don't rip out. So this is the front of the back of the top, and here is the bottom of the back of the top. And what we want to do now is we want to sew around 13 or 15 centimeters on this side, and also 13 to 15 centimeters on this side. So I'm just going to take my measuring tape and I'll measure around 13 centimeters, and then I'm just going to stick a needle in here and pin this together, and then I'm doing the same on the other side. So now we want to sew from this edge to where we stuck the needle in here, and also on the other side we start here to here, and we want to leave this part here open. Now we take our front pieces again, and what we need to do is we're just going to stick our hand in here, and we're going to flip it the good side facing out. And we're doing the same with the other one, and then we're just going to go over to our iron and press everything neatly flat. This is what the two front pieces look like, and what we need to do next is we need to make a long stitch length, so this is what the two front pieces look like now. And what we want to do next is we need to make a stitch along here with a long stitch length close to the edge, because then we want to gather the fabric together, so it will look something like this, because at the end we will pull the two front pieces through the gap that we have left here of the back. We will stick them through here, and at the end this needs to fit in here. So yeah, I don't know, maybe it sounds a bit complicated right now, but trust me, it's not. But yeah, now we need to gather the fabric together. To gather the fabric together, we need to change some settings on our sewing machine. We stay on a straight stitch, but we increase the stitch length to as high as it goes. On my sewing machine I can go to a 4, maybe you can go to a 5. And then another thing we want to do is we want to move our needle all the way to the right, because we want to do the stitching as close to the edge as possible. So I'm moving my needle position all the way to the right. This is where the needle was before, and now when I move it, the needle goes to the right. So one very important thing, we do not front and back stitch at the beginning, and also not at the end. So we're just going to place the fabric under the foot, put the foot down, and now we just start sewing without doing anything else. And you also don't need to sew to the very end. You can stop 1 or 2 centimeters before the end. We do the same on the other side, and we start sewing around 1 centimeters away from the edge here. So we place the fabric under the foot, put the foot down. We do not front and back stitch, and we just start sewing, and we glide the fabric along the foot. And when we stop, we also don't front and back stitch, we just lift the foot and take some thread with us. And now it's super easy to gather the fabric. You just take one of the threads, don't take both, you have to pull them apart. And now you can just pull on it and push the fabric around and gather it together. And then also you can go to the other side, take one of the threads and just pull the fabric together. So this is what it will look like now, and it's the same on the other side. So both are looking like this. So now we take the back of the top, and here is the bottom and here's the top where also the straps are sewn in, and it's very important now that we make sure that the top and the top are both facing up. So now we're just gonna stick one hand maybe in here and feel and pull the fabric of the front of the top through it, and I'm just gonna start pinning it together here just to make sure that the top of the front and the top of the back are staying together. And then I'm gonna take the other side and now we need to make sure that we gather the fabric enough. Maybe you need to continue pulling again a bit on the thread here to gather it together nicely. And now just pin it in place. And now we go over to the sewing machine and we're just gonna sew along here. Make sure that you put your settings of the sewing machine back to normal again, so the needle position needs to be in the middle again and the stitch length needs to be at 2.5 again. So this is what it will look like. The front of the top is just sandwiched in between the two back layers. And now we need to do the same on the other side here. So again, it's very important that here's the bottom, here's the top, and here's also the top, because the two straps need to be at the same place. So this needs to be in between here. So I'm just going to hold on to the top corner of the front. And then I'm handing it over to my other hand, the corner of the top, because now the first thing I'm doing is I'm pinning it in this corner right here. And now I know that everything will be at the right spot. And we just want to make sure that the gathered fabric is evenly spread out in the middle here. And now we go over to our sewing machine and we're gonna sew along here. And now I'm just going to take my scissors and cut all the thread that's hanging around here off. So this is what it looks like now, and what we do now is we're just gonna pull on the two fronts. And now it's looking like this. And now we go back to the iron and press the back of the top flat. So, and here for the bottom of the back, first I would recommend just ironing down the part that we have sewn on both sides. And then we just want to fold the seam allowance inside and press it down, because what we're going to do now, we go back to our sewing machine and we're just going to do a stitch all the way along here to close the gap. And yeah, that's why you need to fold the seam allowance inside. So this is the bottom now, and this is the gap that we have left. So I've just pressed the seam allowance inside here and also here. And now we can just put some needles in here. So now that I've pinned the gap closed, you have two options now. Either you can just sew the gap closed, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start over here and sew all the way along here, just because I think it looks nicer when there's one long stitch all the way across. And that's it for today's sewing tutorial. I think maybe if you have just watched this without following along, maybe the part where we sandwich the front in between the back and sew the front and the back pieces together, it may have looked a bit confusing, but I think when you follow along and do it with your own hands, it makes so much sense, you know? I think this is a really cute summer top. I'm so hungry now, so I don't want to put it on now, and it's also getting a bit dark now. So I'm gonna put it on tomorrow, and you'll see it at the end of this video, how I'm wearing it. And maybe I can also show you a few different ways of how I would style it. But yeah, I think the Niki top is such a cute summer top, and I can't wait to see how yours turn out. And if you have any questions, if there was anything unclear, if there are some steps that you would like me to maybe make a video again, just to go in depth a bit more, please let me know. And yeah, thank you so much for watching this tutorial, and I hope I see you at my next tutorial.